Well, welcome back. This is Julie Baranek, host of the Seven Figure Builder Show, and I'm here today with my friend Whitney Alexandra. Hey, Whitney.
Hey, thanks so much for having me today.
Of course. No, I'm thrilled. And we are going to dig into all things business strategy, mindset with your amazing performance coaching. I'm really excited to get into this. But first and foremost, where in the world are you?
I'm in Toronto, but you can't rely on that because I'm always following the sun. So sometimes it's Mexico, in the summer it's Europe. I love to run my business remote.
Yeah, now that is an amazing thing. And actually, I'd love to chat more of that because that is how has that been for you, right? Like, tell us a bit about your business, your journey, and the ability to be able to be fully remote.
Yeah, so I started my career about 20 years ago. I started working in the corporate side. I was really focused on helping, executives and other leaders be successful in building their businesses and doing a lot of the mindset work, right? It's funny, you can see all of the dots connecting back now, but at that time, I had no idea that this is where I would be. And so I've been running my business for the last 10 years, primarily focused working with women entrepreneurs. So they're at that sort of 6 and 7 figure level. And yeah, one of the key things for me over the last few years was I really wanted to have a business that was entirely remote and working with global entrepreneurs. And so it took a little while to get there, as most good plans do. But now I love, spending the winter instead of the Canadian winters. I'm in Mexico for a couple of months and then in Europe for the summer. So it just really has been such a dream being able to design a business and life that I love that, gets to have as much travel and things as I desire.
Yeah, I love that. And I'm fully remote as well. My husband and I travel a lot. So I love that. But what did you find enabled you to do that? It's difficult for a lot of people to be fully remote with their business. And that's a lot of intentionality to be able to get to that point as to where you are in your business.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing was really simplifying the amount of clients I worked with, simplifying the offers that I had, and I love to go deep, right? Like I go deep when I work with people, but that can happen anywhere. It can happen in a remote way. It can happen while I'm voxering on the beach, right? And I've often found that that in itself inspires the people that I work with to run their business in a different way too, which is so beautiful. It's that little ripple effect that we don't really intend. But it did take a lot of intentionality, like to make sure that my schedule wasn't overpacked, making sure that I didn't have meetings running 7 days a week, or, the time zones weren't killing me because I do have clients in very different time zones. So it took a lot of intention, and it also takes a little bit of time to make sure that you can structure your business in a way that feels good still.
Mhm. Absolutely. And I'm a huge systems and automation person. Like that's just how my brain is wired. But what have you found made a difference for you in your business?
So I am not the systems automation person. I'm totally the opposite. I think for me, it's just been following the things that bring me joy
Mhm.
and doing more of that. And so I'm less rigid about, I only answer Voxer between 8 and 4 or things like that, because there are times when I really want to give my clients fast support. And sometimes it's a weekend and I'm really happy to chat with them.
Mhm.
And so I think it's just, being true to yourself and following the things that bring you joy and allowing your business to be structured the same way, not following someone else's path for success.
Mhm. And to that point, I'm very similar, right? Like I love to provide amazing support for my clients across the board, but not but how do you also set realistic expectations? Like how, I found sometimes you go above and beyond and then people expect it 24 hours a day. Like where's that happy medium?
I have exceptional clients. They're always like, I know it's a Sunday and you don't have to respond, right? So that's almost always how it starts. I always tell them like, You respond, you share when it's convenient for you, and I will respond back when it's convenient for me.
Yeah.
And I think if we're both in that energy of there is no expectation of when they need that response, then that just feels really good and like a really nice way of building our relationship. So it really has just been like loose guide rails.
Mhm. Yeah, no, I like that a lot, and I agree. And also just setting that clear communication path and just being aligned with you're both working to help, move forward in your business.
Yeah.
But you're an amazing performance coach. What are the gaps that you see a lot of people have in their business?
I'll be honest, I think the biggest thing that always strikes me is how small sometimes the dreams can be. Right? Like we really don't dream big enough and we really don't believe like what's really possible for us. And so I often find that is a huge gap where we sort of start is looking at, what's realistic. I hate SMART goals. I hate them. Like as soon as you're like, what is a realistic goal? It's like, oh, yuck. Um, so I'm always encouraging people to think really big and think less about how it's going to happen
Mhm.
and just dream big. And then let's put on our creative thinking hat and think about how a person might do it. Right. And we can sort of create a bit of that emotional distance between it's not possible for me and but might be possible for someone else. And so we can sort of get into that creative energy where we're willing to see our business different, we're willing to see different results, we're willing to create different offers maybe. But truthfully, a lot of my work really starts with what you desire. And I use those words like really intentionally, like light up the fire inside.
Absolutely. And to that, how do you see milestones and like chunking things? Once you establish that massive goal, how do people get a plan to get there?
Yeah, I love to work in 90 days.
Mhm.
90-day sprints are like my jam. So every couple of weeks, I think is the ideal time to sort of section off pieces of work. And that way it makes it a little bit more approachable and the milestones feel a little bit nicer for people. It feels easier to say, okay, I make one sale every couple of weeks and all of a sudden my program's full rather than this month I have to sell 12 seats. And that feels heavy,
Yeah,
feels hard. It feels like something I've never done before, right? And so a lot of it comes back to consistency, but I think also, finding this nice balance between what you believe is possible and what looks like it's possible on paper.
yeah, for sure. And to that point, how do you see that mindset plays into that?
Mindset is everything. Oh my goodness. We could talk about mindset for hours.
Go for it,
Mindset.
girl.
Yeah, mindset is everything. And it's so funny because often I walk people through a bit of a visual exercise where you meet your future self and you're seeing this version of you that's brilliant and beautiful up on stage typically or writing a book. And so those deep desires are in there for a reason. And so I really love to like remind you of who you are and where you're going. And so we can use a lot of that, but typically, I find a lot of the mindset is old stories, old beliefs, and typically they're not even yours. They're old things that have happened or you've adopted them from other people. And so a lot of the work that I do is both addressing some of those head on. And
Mhm.
also, I love to work with subconscious recordings. I love to do some of those hypnotic prompts. And so I find that's a really easy way to sort of access the subconscious and make sure that we're all working on the same goal and in the same direction.
Nice. And how do people break through those mindset blocks? I mean, you mentioned the recordings and working through the subconscious things, but what are some tips that you would give people of like, I know I feel like I'm blocked. I don't know why or where or how to get through that?
Yeah. So typically, like one that I think we could spend hours on is money blocks. We could spend so much time on money blocks and what's possible in your business and what's possible for you and what happens when you make so much money. And so often I'll tell people like, just take one sheet of paper, write all of the beliefs you have about money, and don't label them good, bad, or neutral. Just put them all out there. And on the other side of the paper, you can think like, is that true? Is that mine? Is that a belief I want to carry moving forward? And so even just doing a few of those basic things that I call really interrogating the belief. It sounds aggressive and it's meant to be, right? Like,
Yeah.
let's get to the root and the cause and the reason for why you have this. And so often I find it's those silly beliefs that we have, ones that we're, afraid to share with people because they sound a little dumb, right? We're like, oh, why do I think this way? It's come from somewhere. And so it really is like interrogating that, asking if it's true, choosing another belief, and then when it's popping up all the time, choosing to replace it, noticing and replacing it.
Yeah. And how would you encourage people to get new practices, new habits, and build new beliefs to replace the ones that they're getting rid of?
Yeah, I think sometimes we don't give ourselves enough credit for the great money things that are actually happening to us. So if I have a client that's selling a $25,000 package or something like that, that could feel like I only sell, $2,000 a month. Meanwhile, she sold 25,000 because it's for the year.
Right.
Right. And so all of a sudden, she's not someone who sells $2,000 a month. She's someone who sells $25,000 packages. And that is a totally different person, right? Like when we really think about the identity of the person who sells 2,000 versus 25,000, or if you're into the big consulting dollars, it's 100K contracts or something more. That's a different person.
Mhm.
And so that person is showing up differently, taking action differently, has different level of confidence. And so often I find when we really start to frame their achievements in a different way, then it can lead to some really exceptional results. For me, I'm a runner. So I always think, okay, if I can run a mile, I can run two. And I can build my way up to three, and I can do five pretty soon. And all of a sudden, you're at a half marathon or a full marathon, right?
Yeah.
And a lot of that still is going to come down to desire. Do you want to run a marathon? Maybe you don't, right? But you could, and there's a path towards it.
Yeah. And what has brought you to this point? Can you tell us a bit about your story and your journey that has brought you to where you are?
Yeah, so I started 20 years ago working with a ton of corporate leaders. So I used to help a lot of new partners build their practice, position themselves as an expert in the market. So you can imagine if you're a regular accountant, all of a sudden you're an owner in the business. It's like that's a new identity that you've got to assume. And so I spent about 10 years doing that, working with hundreds of leaders. And then I shifted my business. I started my business and shifted into working with entrepreneurs and working mostly across Canada with small and medium-sized businesses. And what I really realized, especially during the pandemic, was how many women entrepreneurs really needed extra support, had so many things they were juggling. And it really just shone a light on how much support they needed. And what I realized, there was a common theme coming up with many of my clients at that time, where the goals just seemed so heavy and it seemed so hard. And, there were oftentimes I'd have a client that would say, this is my goal for the next 5 years. And meanwhile, it's 3 months later and we've already hit it. And so there were some great things we were able to do, putting in place for people that get them results faster. But this all kind of comes back to that same theme. We don't set big enough goals and we believe it's going to take so much more time to reach them. And so I love to dispel both of those myths.
For sure. And how do you see celebrating success ties in with that? Like celebrating those individual milestones that you hit?
I celebrate everything. And I encourage every client to celebrate everything too, right? If a client says no, celebrate that. If a client says yes, celebrate that fully. Celebrate every seat that you fill, every dollar that comes in, every follower I thank. It's all of that. And I just think, when we focus so much on the good things that are happening or find the goodness in whatever is happening, um, then so much more multiplies.
For sure. I love that. And
Yeah.
I'm curious, you've accomplished so much in your career, personally, professionally, but how do you define success? What does that look like for you?
For me, it's like pure joy. Do I wake up? Do I love what I do? Do I love how I get to spend my time? Do I love my clients? It's like if I'm full of joy, then I know I'm doing things right.
That's amazing. I
Yeah.
love it. And if you had the attention of the whole world for 5 minutes, what would you tell them?
I would tell them dream bigger, dream bigger, because whatever it is that you're dreaming about, it is completely possible. And you might just not have had the right timing or the right plan or the right motivation to make it happen yet, but it can happen so much easier and so much faster than what you have in your head right now.
I love that. And looking back at your younger self, is there anything that you would have told her or wish that she would have known?
It's probably the same thing, like be as big as possible. Right? I think so often, it's funny, every person, but especially women entrepreneurs, we have this belief that something is weird inside here, right? Like I am weird, and if people just knew how weird I was. And so, we're constantly going through this process of being a little less than. And so I think I would just love to have told my younger self, and I'm going to tell everybody now, like blow the doors off. Let us see all of you, the most brilliant and beautiful parts. And if it triggers other people, who cares, right? Keep on going and shining your light.
I love that. And for people listening that would love to connect with you, where can they find you online?
I'm always on Instagram and I would love for them to come say hello. I'm Whitney Alexandra on Instagram, and there's tons of information on my website too.
Awesome. And we'll have all the links below for people to come check it out. But thank you, Whitney. This has been amazing.
Wonderful. Thanks so much.
Yeah, of course. And if you found value in this episode, please do share it. That's how people find us. And you can find me at sevenfigurebuilder.com. And I'll see you on the next episode.